Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our DFS and betting preview for this week's John Deere Classic. Going to break down what to expect from TPC Deere Run, some of my key stats and metrics that I'm using to identify my top plays, and then afterwards go through the betting and DFS board a bit and bring you some of my top plays and pieces of exposure for the week, and I'm getting to here early on a Monday. So a lot to get through. Bunch of information to spit at you. I'm going to keep this quick and concise just like last week. Let's go ahead and hop right on in. Our modeling for this week is going to look very similar to what we had last week at the Rocket Mortgage. Both are birdie fests and also shorter tracks to emphasize a lot of the same things. So when we take a look at the approach profile, you'll notice on the Patreon version that a lot of the categories that we're weighing a little bit more are the shorter ones from 175 yards and in. And while there were a few longer holes around the Rocket Mortgage Classic, there are 2 or 3 out there this week as well. Majority of your scoring looks are going to come from 175 and in. So you'll see an emphasis in my modeling on that section of your bag. In terms of your putting stats, we've got pure bent grass greens. Last week they were bent/POA. This time, just regular old bent grass. So if you're going to look at any sort of agronomy stats, you want to look at shots gained putting on bent, and the greens aren't really fast or slow. They're about average in terms of speed, so that's really all I was looking at there. Off the tee, this is definitely an accuracy over a distance kind of golf course, and you've seen quite a bit of correlation between driving accuracy and fairways gained and what you have there on the leaderboard. So definitely incorporating that. We've got birdie or better percentage because of the low scoring. You've got to have the kind of horsepower to go out there and get to something like 15 to 25 under. Looking at shots gained at Birdie Fest, just trying to lean on that even more so. Around the green is pretty much non-existent out there in my modeling. And then for our comp courses, you've got a lot of the same tracks I was looking at last week, including the Rocket Mortgage itself, 3M Open, Wyndham, FedEx, all tracks that we were looking at for that track that we're also looking at for this kind of event. So with that being said, what are some of the golfers that I'm looking for? And I guess to kind of summarize the key stats, we want guys that are good with the shorter to mid irons and also players that are good on bent grass. And Sungjae Im is a player that long term we like at these birdie fests because of his birdie or better upside. He's got a lot of firepower. He's extremely aggressive when he's playing his best golf, and is also a player that's capable of gaining a bunch of strokes with the flat stick. When we get him on a surface like bent grass, that is one of his better surfaces on tour, it's also going to be a lot of positive news out there for Sungjae Im. So first off, the form is what's getting me onto him as my main spent up option. He had the T3 at the Travelers, did miss the cut at the US Open, which Pinehurst got a lot of players. I don't know if you want to worry about that all that much, but he had a top 10 at the Memorial, also a top 10 at the Charles Schwab, 2 events that have much stronger fields than what we're going to get this week. And of course, that third place was at another signature event, which had Scotty Scheffler, Rory, all of those guys sort of teeing it up. So I really like the trajectory of his form at this stage. And when you take a look at the shots gained metrics, there's not anything that's been a real weakness. He's gaining across all 4 stat categories. If we zoom out a little bit and look at the last 24 measured rounds, so look at an even bigger sample size, you'll see that it holds up, right? Still gaining across all 4 categories, which tells me that he's back to the good old Sungjae Im, right? At his best, he's somebody that's solid in all 4 categories. It isn't elite in any one in particular, right? He's not the best off the tee player. He's not always the best iron player, but what he does do for you is doesn't suck. He doesn't lose strokes in like 4 or 5 in any one category. So you love that he's getting back to that kind of mindset. And now that we get him at a birdie fest, I think that it's all signs go for Sungjae Im. Now, I do think he'll be popular. I think he'll be more popular than Jordan Spieth. I think that he'll be in that same range as guys like a Sepp Straka, maybe even slightly higher owned than guys like an Aaron Rai or Mav McNeely. But when you're coming in with the most solid form, I'd say the most consistent form of anyone up top, also a player that long-term has torn apart these easier kind of golf courses, it makes him extremely attractive for some of those GBPs. So he's 10,300. I didn't take an outright yet, as the number on Hard Rock Bet was nowhere near where it needs to be for me to go out there and get some action. But at this stage, I'm imagining that he'll be my highest owned player in my GBP lineups, as he's got the mix of the form, which I think gives him safety, a floor out there in terms of his projection, but then also the upside to win this thing. I mean, he's all on the rise, a player that I think is looking more and more solid as the week goes on, and in a weak field event like this, maybe that is capstoned by a win out there. Next up, we've got JT Poston, my first outright bet of the week, and I took him at plus 3,000. So you're not getting a crazy outright number here, but what you are getting is an elite tier course fit. So if we take a look at the event history, you'll see that he's really excelled here. He had had the win there 2 years ago, obviously, but a top 6 finish there last year. And in some of his other starts, he did have a few missed cuts around TPC Deere Run. He's really been hit or miss. He's the kind of guy that either gets into contention around this track or usually is packing it home and missing the weekend, which for large field GPPs is the kind of player we're looking for, right? We want that upside. We're not really as worried about a player's floor. And for the outright bet, it's a lot of the same, right? We're looking for a guy to go out there and beat all 155 other golfers, and you're going to need somebody that's capable of a ceiling performance. Well, the last 2 years, JT Poston has showed you at this golf course, and while his recent form ranking is only number 45 in the field, overall, just my number 57th ranked play out of the entire field, you're going to kind of have to look past the shots gained metrics. Just to give you an idea of why he's not grading out the best, if we take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, you see he's losing in both ball striking categories. If you take a look at the last 24 measured rounds for Poston, you'll see that holds up, right? Short game's there, always going to be there for JT Poston, but hasn't been hitting it as well as we'd like. Well, the reason why we can have some optimism here is that he's started to turn it around. So if we take a look at his last starts out here in Tour, he's made the cut in all of his starts. Now, a few of them were no cut events, so obviously doesn't mean that much. But look at this, T55, T32, T22, and then the T12 finish back there 4 starts ago are starting to look like the JT Poston that impressed us towards the start of last year, that went out there, ended up winning this event a few years ago. He's kind of taken a step back, right? He was on the ascent and now he's kind of stagnated a bit. So hopefully this is a sign of better things to come. And in terms of course fit, you're not going to find a better spot. You want that bent grass putting? Well, he's one of the best bent grass putters in the field. You want solid mid to short iron play? Well, if there's certain categories where JT Poston shines, it's from 150 yards and in. So he's got that going for it. He's kind of like a cheaper Sun GM. Now, Sunjay more consistently going to gain across all 4 categories, but Poston, when he's playing his best golf, post a very similar type of stat profile. He'll gain across all 4 categories. The issue for him lately has been the ball striking. So we're going to need a better week from him when it comes to actually striking the golf ball. But given the fact that he's won here before, he's shown that ability over the last few years, I do think there's some upside out there with a Poston. And next up for our last core play, so it took him here at 60-1, we've got Mark Hubbard at $8,400. And Mark Hubbard is a very similar type of player to what we have at JT Poston. Maybe not the same sort of form, I'd actually say better form than what we have with Poston, but a lot of the things we said that JT Poston does well is what Mark Hubbard's able to go out there and do. He's not the longest, not the best off the tee player, but deadly with his irons when he's playing well, and one of the streakiest putters that we have out here at Tour. And while the event history isn't as stout as what we have with JT Poston, I think it's coming, and it's trending in that direction. You had a T41 his first start here, then a T13 2 years ago, and then last year was able to post his best finish ever at this event with the T6 finish. So obviously if he could improve on that and post a top 5, that would be sweet at $8,400, but I think you're starting to see the course fit pay off, right? First year with that T41, I played him hoping that we'd get that perfect marriage, and it didn't really work out. T13 was pretty solid. T6 last year, I was thrilled about with Mark Hubbard's performance. This time around, I'm hoping he can go out there and best that. So a player that in GPPs, I don't think will be popular. And I think we can say the same thing about Poston as well. Poston, Hubbard are going to be guys I'm expecting to be around 10, maybe 15% owned. I'm expecting Sunjay to be maybe the most popular player this week. So you're not going to get that much leverage there. You're certainly not going to get cute or different to the field. But with these guys down here in the 8 and 9K range, I do think there's an opportunity to potentially get some leverage to the field here. So we'll have to see where the ownership comes in on Wednesday. I'm assuming that both will be 15% or lower, but even if they're in that 15 to 18% range, are likely still guys that I'm going to get well over the field on. Before we hop into our value plays, 3 more outrights that I'm adding to the card, let's go ahead and mention our Patreon page, which of course is where you can get access to all of the spreadsheets that you see throughout my videos. On there, we've got all my projections, my modeling, and my take for every single player that's teeing it up. So not just the guys that I mentioned here in the videos, I do projections and modeling for every single guy teeing it up. So whether you're playing DFS, you're outright betting, whatever the case may be with your golf exposure, I have all the information and research that you need to go out there and get your process started. We've got the modeling, the recent form like I mentioned, we've got course history, event history, recent form, you name it, right? Everything you could possibly need to go out there and do your research, you guys can find over there on the Patreon page. So make sure to check it out for my take on every single player this week, including my projections for everyone in the field and my entire player pool out there for GPPs, as well as my entire betting card. All right, with the plug out of the way, let's move on to our first value option, who is going to be Ryo Hisatune at $7,600. And while he didn't have his best stuff last week, without his best stuff, and I'll put that in quotes out there, right? He went out there and still played pretty decent golf. He finished T31. The start before that was a T35. So while it hasn't been very flashy for him recently, the shots gained metrics have looked fantastic for Royo. So if we go over here to $7,600, you see that he's gaining in every category but the flat stick, and most importantly with the 2 shots gained ball striking categories. He's gaining both off the tee and with the approach. Now, if we zoom out a little bit, give him a bigger sample, you may say, oh, maybe it's a small sample thing, right? Maybe it's just the last few events. Well, no. If you look at the last few months for Hisatune, you can see he's still gaining across all 4 stat categories. He's very much so like a Sungjae Im who doesn't have a weakness. And at a golf course where we're looking for some off-the-tee accuracy, he's a top 10 accuracy player in this kind of field. Where we're looking for somebody that has some birdie or better upside, he's top 25 in birdie or better percentage. And when we're looking for some bent grass putting, he checks all of those very specific stats that we're looking for. So he's a stat monster this week. He's a model monster if you're going out there and doing any sort of statistical analysis. And you can see he's my number 12 ranked play, despite only being number 25 in the pricing. So a player that I think should just be more expensive. And though the form hasn't been sexy lately, right? 31st and then a 35th place finish, he's still playing solid enough golf where we could see that pop performance coming. So at 7,600, I like the course fit, especially the more positional style that he has. And at a golf course where you've got to go out there, make a bunch of putts, get to that 15 to 25 under, I think he has the horsepower to get to that kind of score. So just like Hubbard, I took him at 60 to 1, which, he's the same outright odds as a lot of the other guys here in the 8K range, and he's only $7,600. So the modeling agrees with that, right? The modeling thinks that he should be a top end of the 8K range player, should probably be at that $8,600 where Luke Clanton is, if we're being honest. I think you're getting a really solid spot from the salary perspective in DFS. And then from the outright value, I still think he has the upside to go out there and cash it. And next up, we've got ourselves Davis Riley, who I'm taking at $7,300, and I bet him at 100 to 1. And what you like about Riley is the fact that he's a top 5 birdie or better percentage player in the field. Just makes a lot more birdies than all of his peers. And to find other guys that are also in the top 5, you've got to go the whole way up to the 8, 9, and even 10K range to find those kind of players. So you're getting elite level firepower on a guy who won in a better field recently, right? Charles Schwab went out there, was able to beat much better players than what he's going to have this week. And though the form is tailed off a little bit, right? He's posted just some very mediocre performances in made cuts recently. It hasn't been horrible from the stat perspective. So just to give you an idea, we zoom in on the last 12 measured rounds, and what is he? $7,300. So I can find our spot here. You'll see that he's losing a little bit on approach. Okay, not the best, but he's about neutral off the tee and gaining with the putter, about a half a stroke per round with the flat stick. Well, if you take a look at the approach play in particular, it's been completely doomed by a few bad rounds. A few bad rounds where he's lost like 3-4 shots gained. Outside of that, he's been very consistently gaining with the iron play. And just to give you an idea of that, right, zoom out a little bit, right? You give him a slightly larger sample size and you see things come back to the baseline. You can see he's gaining more off the tee, still gaining a bunch with the flat stick, and that approach play, which was well into the negative over the last 12, well, if you double the sample, he's about an average iron player. So the one sample, right, he's losing about a third of a stroke per round. That tells us the other sample, well, he was gaining about a third of a stroke per round. So obviously when he won and he was going out there and performing a little bit better, it was the iron play that took him to that. So that's what we need to rebound. That's why he's only $7,300. But unless this guy's going to be 15-20% owned, I think this is a very inefficient price tag. He's the kind of player that should probably be at least $7,800, $7,900. And you could argue like a Hisatune should probably be $8,000 given the fact that he won over the last month or so. So a player that I think has upside to cash at 100 to 1 ticket, and it's $7,300. It once again checks a lot of the boxes we're looking for. decent bent grass putter, better with the mid to short irons. Another player, like I said, top 5 in birdie or better percentage that can get to that 20 to 25 under. And for our last play, it's going to be a local, went to college at University of Illinois. It is Nick Hardy at $7,000. I bet him at 125 to 1, so crazy number we got on Nick. And what you like about him is he's starting to trend in the right direction. If we take a look at the last 12 measured rounds, Nick Hardy is starting to peak at the right time. He's gaining in both ball striking categories. Around the green, not his best, but this is a week where I'm hardly even considering the chipping and around the green. And with his flat stick, it's no surprise that his favorite surface on tour is the one that's close to home, bent grass, out there in the Midwest. And you can see on bent grass in particular that he does his best work. He gains about 1/4 of a stroke per round. That combined with that elite level ball striking lately, if he gets back to gaining on these bent grass greens, strikes the ball like he has for the last month or so, well, that's top 25 for Nick Hardy, potentially with even better upside. So if you go to the event history, you'll see that it's not been the best for him at this, event that he probably holds clear, close to the heart, but it hasn't been horrible either. He played it 5 years ago when he was still an amateur and made the cuts. 2 years ago, T30, and then last year, T21. So I would imagine that now he has his tour card. He's probably going to play this every single year, as once again, he's got a lot of friends and family still in the area. And at $7,000, he's the kind of player that I'll take a shot on, right? We know he's got the motivation. He's gonna want to win for some of the local people there. But on top of that, there's a legit reason to think that he might have a better week, right? It's not just like, oh, it's a good story, let's play the guy, right? Like, that's foolish. You'd be broke if he went out there and did that every single week. It's the fact that there's a reason why he might play better here. He's used to these bent grass greens, and the stats back that up. So, a little narrative for sure, but mostly for me, just a player that the model loved this week. And you can see here, he's number 34 in my model, despite being number 59 in the pricing. So kind of like some of the other plays that we've gone through, should probably be more expensive and should probably get more ownership that they're going to get out there on Wednesday. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for the DFS and betting preview. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also go ahead and comment down below what you've got as your winner for this week. So whoever it is, it could be anyone on the board. If you go out there, grab the winner, go ahead and win a free month of my Patreon page. So go ahead, claim your player before anyone else steals them, and if you end up getting them right, you will get that access for a month. I appreciate your support here on the channel. As I said before, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys for the rest of the content throughout the week. Then I'll include a prop preview out here at some point, a weekly live stream Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern time, where we'll chat about weather, we'll take a look at some of the ownership before lock, as well as all of your questions down there in the chat. So I'm looking forward to that. Make sure to stop on by for that out there on Wednesday, again 7 p.m. Eastern time, and we'll get ready to rock and roll for all of our exposure this week.